Okay. Can you guys think of anything else we're currently in the middle of? We should probably add to the list.
I think that's all.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, I'm not sure, like, having such a small group today, how much we can advance with some of the things. But
Uh,
yeah.
no, I was going to say that because most of the things like would requires some of the things are pending. Is that okay? Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
So because we still need to talk about them in the specific groups. So I don't know if what could we do about them today.
Yeah, the one thing I think we could do, perhaps, just because then it's recorded, is just go over each of these things, just say where they are right now. So, I mean, we can all be on the same page and about where the group stands. I think that there's so much stuff open. Like, for example, I know Maurice said that he's not up to date with the practical stuff, so it might be useful to just say what we're doing. So if you want to get involved in any of these things, Maurice, you can just do it. Feel free. I think we could brainstorm some of the stuff that is less clear right now. For example, the structure stuff, it's kind of took a halt. So perhaps, though we cannot make decisions, we can discuss it, Uh, and anyway, I think there are some things we could do that way. So just I'll try to go slowly over them. I think I have a kind of okay idea, but perhaps there's some stuff I lost track because of the last couple of weeks just being away. I know the symposium, it's actually the thing that is the least developed in all of this. We had this very vague idea. We wanted to organize kind of an online conference. The idea was that it wouldn't be by the end of the year. It would be like around the beginning of second semester, like August or whatever. But I mean, we're already mid-May. Perhaps we should be more conservative about this and try something at the end of the year. I don't know. I know we had a meeting where we came up with a basic structure. The idea was to divide the symposium between panels on themes, and also panels that were based on organizations, like a mediator and an organization or set of organizations talking about their experience. And I remember Vitor suggested that these things with organizations and movement, that we actually meet them beforehand, plan something, so that it's not just a superficial thing. But the idea was to mix those two things, like panels which had a kind of ideas that have to do with the STP, with people come from the outside and also people from the STP in these panels, and then that other thing, that kind of thing with the movements. But we never really suggested anyone concretely for this. There have been like very vague ideas on who to invite and how to go about this, but we're pending a second meeting. We kind of postponed it on purpose because we were just overworked. We postponed it, like actually doing a meeting about moving this forward. The one thing that I think we do have as a kind of interesting context that was raised is that there is this very interesting movement in Jackson, Mississippi, the Corporation Jackson movement, and Daniel Tutt recently made kind of a connection for us with them, and there is a good chance we could invite them, for example, as one of these organizations to talk about their political experience. We could also invite other people, but it's just the only news I know of in that regard. And I know this week we were starting to talk about setting up the second meeting, right? But it hasn't happened yet. Anyone who's here who wants to join that, there is a WhatsApp group for that. Anything else on the symposium? No, right? I'm not sure what you guys feel. I have the impression that it's probably going to be a good idea to postpone it a bit, like, and do it more slowly, right? I mean, rather than rush. Otherwise, we would have to really, really work on this like now. I think it's just thinking about it makes me dizzy. So, yeah.
Yep, and we already have like a short calendar for the translation probably and the publication strategy. So perhaps we should save the symposium in the back of our heads, but not really focus on this right now.
Yeah, talking about the meeting calendar, I think right now I'm just trying to find here the last version of the calendar, so I can paste it here as well. I think today we're doing this organizational meeting. Then next week, Fernanda and Caio are presenting. Then the week after that, Amelia Davenport is presenting. Then after that, John is presenting, right? Then Allan is presenting on the 12th. Then John with Dennis are presenting on the 19th. So I think that until the 19th of June, this is the calendar. I still don't know some of this. I mean, to add to the website, like I added you guys' presentation, just like 2 presentations. I added it to the website. I didn't know how you guys wanted me to describe it. If you can just.
I forgot to talk about it. Sorry, I was going to ask if we could like do an offline meeting on when the meeting doesn't go to
like unlisted.
Sorry.
Like unlisted, like
yes,
as in okay.
Yeah. Is that okay?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. I feel more comfortable with that.
Yeah, no, don't worry. I mean, we don't need to record or make it available if you don't want. Not at all.
We can record it, but I think that I'm not ready for it to go on the website.
No, perfect. Don't worry about it. Yeah, so I think that like for these meetings, so the 15th today, the 22nd, I added like 2 presentations, but I didn't know what to say in the description. If you guys could send, if you want, you could send a description over in our group. I can add it to the website. Then
we'll do.
Amelia's, it's explained already. She sent me everything. Then John's, Allan's, and John Dennis duo. Also, if you guys can like at some point if you can send some detail or already directly add it to the website, that would be great, just so it's easier for people to understand what's going to happen. That pretty much means that we have about a month and a half of presentations already scheduled, which is cool. It's good to have a good calendar. Yeah, so I think for the meeting, again, is there anything else on the calendar? Perhaps more meetings. I know we were inviting actually somebody, I think Isaac. Hi, Isaac. I think Isaac just mentioned Varn Vlog, and we actually wanted to invite Derek he already agreed to speak. I'm going to suggest to see if he doesn't want to present something on the week after the 19th, because he said he could present in June. So let me add that so I can ask him. Oh my God. Okay. Yeah, so structure-wise, we have these 2 things that are open. We had like a main meeting to discuss the first of these 2 points. I'm just gonna paste them again here, our little list, just so for people who arrive later. Here. This is the list, and this is the calendar. Just keep it updated for everyone. So in terms of structure, we had a meeting I think a month and a half ago, to discuss that idea of having somebody work as a kind of general organizer or a centralized organizer of the collective for now. The justification is that we're starting to have a lot of projects, and having somebody who could dedicate a couple of hours to think over the organization of the group in general, and if they needed like some funding to do that or some resources to do that, we would try to kind of pool resources to financial resources, but also help technically to make it feasible. But I think we hit a wall because we were just going about it kind of in a messy way. There were some people discussing putting this together, but we weren't really being transparent to the whole group. So we said, okay, let's step back and try again. In the meantime, we also had this idea of doing a similar thing with the research teams. So there was also the idea of not only having somebody occupying the position of organizer more formally and with some help to be able to actually think through, like strategically and so on, how we organize for a while. The idea was to have somebody do something similar with the content of the research, where somebody becomes kind of principal researcher or coordinator of research for a couple of months. They don't need to propose the content of every meeting, but they kind of curate a theme which they think is relevant for what we've been doing, and everyone else tries to fit that theme a bit, or that kind of guides us a bit during that period. It's an opportunity also for us to study things that people feel like we're not looking into, but they like the topic, so we can do that. It's also an opportunity for people to kind of think both ideas have to do with circulating within the group some skills that usually gets kind of centralized over a small group of people. The skill of looking at the group organizationally and trying to kind of think about that part of stuff, right? And also the skill of making the effort to stitch together people's different interests and coming up with kind of a cohesive global view of what we're doing, and trying to kind of reflect that back to the group and that sort of thing. So that both ideas have to do with that. Those two ideas are kind of stopped at the moment. I don't think we have any meetings dedicated to that right now, or any kind of. I think the only novelty that came out of that meeting that was kind of set in stone is that we agreed that now polls are valid for 1 week, right? So we can use that in our favor to make decisions. We know now that if you post the poll, if you advertise it enough, you put it on also let everyone know in the community bulletin board that there is a poll open. Everyone can join in and say things for a week and vote, but then that's it, right? Of course, if there's any big issue, somebody can open exceptions, but generally it's a way of knowing that this thing's now a bit more clear, I think, on how they work. So it should be easier for us to make some decisions. But yeah, those two ideas are kind of stopped. The last version that I heard, I'm not sure if we should discuss this now or how people feel about it, but the last idea I heard was from Vito, who suggested a different, very radical approach to the central admin thing. Personally, I liked it, but I'm not sure if you guys discussed it while I wasn't here, which was the idea of taking everyone who is in the WhatsApp group, doing a lottery with everyone. Whoever comes out might be somebody who hasn't been around for like a year, doesn't matter. And then we ask them, do you want to be the central admin? The person can say no. If they say no, we do the lottery again until we find somebody who says yes. And once somebody says yes, we ask, what do you need in order to do this function, if you want to do it? Like, do you need a bit of money to free up your time? Do you need more knowledge about how the group functions, how the softwares, platforms we use operate? Do you need passwords? What do you need? And then we try to provide those things for the person, right? So I think that's kind of a radical idea, because it's not about selecting the best person for the job. It's about using a lottery so that anyone can occupy this position, even for people who have been away from the group for a long time. But if they, they are kind of taken by the idea to, okay, I want to do this. I want to try to coordinate the group for a while. Why not? Let's just see what happens. Probably my opinion is that we should have a criteria for, okay, this is not working. How do we try again if it's not working? Other than the person saying, I don't feel like doing it anymore. Should it be like a cycle? Should it last a certain time? Should there be a way of saying, okay, perhaps we should try out someone else? But just my sake, like it looks like something that looks like an idea that could work. And it's weird enough, like it sounds weird enough to have to do, to sound like us. So, but yeah, I'm not sure if you guys have any ideas on this.
I'm not sure about this idea because I feel like if you haven't been active on the WhatsApp for a while, like is it really likely that you have time to devote to this? Maybe this might bring someone in who would otherwise have been inactive, and they would be more active if they were given that responsibility. But I wonder if it might not be more efficient to just keep the subset of people that want this position, and then have a lottery among that subset, rather than the entire set of WhatsApp members.
So yeah, I mean, yeah, I think that the only difference there is, yeah, I don't remember now why it suggested everyone. I don't know. I just like the idea that, people who think they're outside of the group, they are just in, like, if you don't want to be, you should just get out of the WhatsApp group. If you don't want to be harassed by people saying, do you want to rule everything? But yeah, I hope somebody who doesn't have time will just say no rather than say yes and then not be able to do it, right?
Yeah, I also love the idea that someone could like show up one day and on that day we have the lottery and then they are selected. Like, they have no idea what the group is.
Yeah, exactly. Isaac like just joined and like one meeting and he's like, okay, so now you organize the group.
Yeah, maybe part of the process though is we say like, okay, you've been selected, but can you devote at least, like this many hours per week?
Yeah, because I think that what I liked about this is that I think it makes it clearer that it's not a duty, it's a right, in the sense that it's not meant to be, you've been selected to work for the collective, because you might very well take that position and delegate every work to other people. If you manage to do it, to delegate to others, you need to have good relationships, know other people. It's not that easy, right? But I think that it's interesting just to, what I find kind of charming is just the idea that we would ask anyone who is involved if they want, and like being asked that question is kind of being part of the domain of people who might be asked to be part of this. That would define who is in. You might say, no, I don't want, like, I prefer just to remain quiet, or might not even answer because you forgot this WhatsApp group. But I find it interesting, at least, the idea that, anyone could be in that position. And then you should, of course, just because they said yes, doesn't mean we can make it happen. If they say, yeah, I'd love to, but I would need to learn what the hell S2P does because I've been put in this group, I don't even know who you guys are. Like, yeah, probably that's going to put the person in a very complicated position to accept, right? Perhaps we cannot give them the resources they need to do it. But I wonder, like, if it wouldn't be nice to give the opportunity to people who might, think they're not prepared to say, yeah, no, but giving you the resources you need, either it's like pulling financial resources together so you have some money to, to free up some time, or writing down things we're doing so that you have clarity over what they are, like all those things. By clarifying something to these people, we would be also clarifying to ourselves, right? So it would be useful. It wouldn't be like a useless thing. I don't know. Whereas people who feel they're ready to do this probably won't ask much, like, or will already ask specific things. I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I just found it a charming proposition.
Yeah, there's also the consideration of the pay, and then like maybe some members of the group really want to work hard to because they need the pay, and maybe someone from like in a more privileged position doesn't need it as much. So like, how do we balance this with the anyone can be in this position,
Yeah, I think if the person says I don't need any pay, like I want to do it and I don't need money to do it. Like I just need more information. Then we give that person information. If they need money, we try to raise money.
Okay, so it's on a case by case. Whoever is selected, they can basically negotiate the rate.
Yeah, I think that's a better idea, because what we were doing last time that I think is weird is that we start discussing it as if we're hiring somebody. But if you're hiring somebody and it's like a work, then there's the issue of fairness of pay, as if we're asking for a certain sacrifice. People are losing something to be in that position, and then you're compensating them for what they're losing, the time they're losing. But in reality, right now, the group doesn't organize like that. Like people who actually organize this group aren't really losing anything by organizing it. They're gaining. They are the people who know the most how the group organizes, and they get a chance to experiment stuff, right? I mean, it's not exactly a matter of being hired for free. For example, I do a lot of work for the group. I don't feel like I'm sacrificing. I do the time that I feel is worth doing it. If somebody has no free time and it would be very sacrificing for them to do this, one thing is for us to help them open some time. Like, okay, so you don't need to get this freelance job. We can get you some money so you have some free time to do it. But we would just be opening time for them to do something that should be pleasurable, shouldn't be a sacrifice, right? And if they don't want to like edit stuff or write down Excel spreadsheets, they can delegate that task to other people in the group. And that would be their own way of coordinating. Some people might try to do it. Some people might get others to do it. I don't know. I just think it's a good kind of shift of perspective, where we don't assume that whoever gets this is being hired to work as a secretary or admin for the group. Whoever gets this is being given the right to think about the group as a whole, right? It's like it's a free pass to be a sovereign for a while, not to be the homo sacer of the group. Hopefully. And we see if the person, what do you do when you can kind of decide, okay, let's split the meeting for the next couple of months, one meeting, like just try things, see what happens. So that's why I think it's actually to make this work, we would actually need a way of saying, okay, something is not working. Yeah, I think this is the only way to overcome democratic centralism, rather than having, many subjects and one sovereign. You have like many sovereigns and one subject. So everyone can be a sovereign for a while, and everyone behaves like one subject to that, and then you change, and then somebody else pretends like they're sovereign a bit, and then you change, rather than yeah. So I don't know. I think that the big problem there would be either that this should be a short-term thing so that we don't get stuck on something that's not working, or that we have feedback meetings to make sure that, if something is not going well, people are aware of that and they can decide, okay, guys, like this is not working, somebody else should take on. you know, something like that. But I think it's different. That one thing is to choose somebody who's going to do the heavy lifting and sacrificing their time, it's like a secretary or an admin in that sense. Another thing is to choose somebody who's going to be thinking how to solve these problems, and it might solve them on their own, but might also get other people involved and delegate these tasks in a different way, something like this. For example, one a difference would be, it might be a function that helps us make the group more decentralized, because the person takes on this job and then they say, fuck it, I'm not going to solve everything alone. And they make sure more people get involved doing smaller tasks. Suddenly more people are, you know, doing things for the group. So I don't know, like that might be a possibility. So I think it's a slightly different way of thinking about it, you know?
I was thinking maybe Renzo mentioned earlier that I'm not sure, but we also talked about collaborating with other political organizations. We mentioned something about the integration of new members to the collective. And I think when the conversation was going on about the central admin, I can't remember who suggested that we do like, I don't know, whoever wants to be the central admin can like draft a proposal and so on. So I'm thinking if we can like come with something that combines all of this, maybe if we can like set a working plan that we wish to stick on to for the next 1 year, 2 year, and I don't know, maybe just plan what groups and collectives and organizations we will be working on with. We will be working with on different projects. I don't know, maybe we can think more of how we are going to integrate new people. So I was thinking of myself, like, and so now I haven't given any presentation, and honestly, I have nothing now to do besides my work. And I don't think that it's quite like important right now to do this, but maybe by the end of the year, we can start working on what we have previously discussed on like writing something on the modern history of the post-war left in Lebanon. So that would be something. And I was thinking that maybe that's an interesting area to integrate many people who aren't necessarily affiliated in academia in their like private lives or individual lives. So writing and reading and so on is not their work. So yeah, I'm thinking maybe we need to plan this before we jump to lottery and elections and so on, or whatever. Yeah.
So just so I understand, like, you think we should have like a more clear general strategy for the next couple of years before we get people in to do stuff?
Yeah. First, just to be precise on what's the work that is expected to be done from the central admin, like the most essential work, and what other tasks other people can be helping on with, and just to have a clear plan of how we will be going on with this collective once we start structuring more and more and dividing the work among us. And maybe this will help us evaluate the first term or experience of a central admin, of having a central admin too. So we have like some criteria or something to see.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking with my hands now. I lost words, but yeah, yeah. I hope to.
No, it makes sense to me. I mean, we never had like a. I wonder how we mix these two things together, because if we're moving forward with the idea that we're going to delegate to specific people for a while, themes. So, for example, somebody might start, telling us, hey guys, let's look in the next 2 months into like discussions on ecology. So if we had took a very clear plan, whoever gets the position wouldn't have much freedom, right? So we could have a strategy, though we never had something like this, but it would have to be plastic enough to give people who occupy this position some freedom to try things. So there is some, I mean, yeah. I'm not sure how if it's better, like just thinking out loud here, like if it's better to expect people who occupy the position to come up with a strategy for the period they are in the position, but the strategy doesn't need to last more than their position. So if the person is like 6 months an admin, okay, come up with a strategy for those 6 months, which is already very helpful. Or if we need a strategy that is even bigger, and then when they get the position, they go like, okay, so I need to do this to get there. Like, I'm not sure what position
But
is
my
that.
question is, does really the central admin needs to come up with this strategy? Can't we all do it collectively and then like have one among our comrades like to be taking the lead on just like managing the working of this strategy that we agreed on? Because I'm also thinking, you know, this will make it very, what did you say, plastic. So it will be changing all the time with every term. And do we need to do this? Or because if we agreed on like 6 months or a year term, but we can easily imagine what, not easily, but we can like anticipate what the work will be for the next few years. So I don't know what's the vision that we need to be sticking on to.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I just have a hard time because since we never had that, we never had an overarching strategy, right? We had more of a protocol than a strategy in the sense of a description of what we do every week, and what happens in the big scale actually is the consequence of that. Like, it's a protocol, like making sure everyone who's here gets a chance to present, that we try to stick together the presentations that are given. Like, for now, that's how we've been moving forward. I think just now we're starting to have like, you know, what if we do a symposium? What if we bring, so like perhaps it's a moment of change. I don't know how you guys feel, like, but it will be the first time we have that discussion.
Can I go? Okay. I think that we are in a moment that would be good if we try to find out collectively what would be a nice strategy. Maybe thinking in short terms is a little bit easier for us since we never had anything like similar to this before. So perhaps thinking about 6 months, it's a good start, because I think if we could be able to think about not only things that are happening that we need to focus on, but like where we want to take the group, it would be nice maybe to also like decentralize the work of the central admin. Like the central admin wouldn't need to be someone that is like always I don't know, in this function of knowing everything, but always in the central admin, yes. but it would be, so that would free up the person to maybe be more creative about what the central admin should do, etc. What this function could be. Because we have in mind, like, okay, for the 6 months, we want to do this or that. Our strategy is to take care of this and that thing of the group, this organizing, or like the symposium would be something nice. Like something that we never thought about, and I don't know, I was thinking that maybe these kinds of strategies help us think like what is possible for the SCP. Like, okay, we can get in certain activities that before we thought we never thought about it. I don't know if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, I think the idea of a strategy is an interesting one, because I think one of the opportunities we have right now is to kind of bring together the theory of political experimentation that drove a lot of why we kept meeting, with like the actual political experiment of making this group work as it grows larger. And yeah, I mean, we haven't really had a global strategy, but I think it would make sense to try to articulate one, to develop one, and to kind of have two different levels of experimentation and randomization for these two different positions. Like, I think it would make sense to start randomizing the researcher position relatively soon, to get practice for what that looks like, to kind of because I do think a lot of the people that show up have pre-existing interests. That's always been our kind of criterion, right? Is like, what are you into, and how does it resonate with what you're seeing here at STP, right? So that's something I think we can kind of work on. I think trying to relate this question of a global strategy, and especially an event like the Symposium, makes a lot of sense as like an opportunity to try to clarify what strategies are, and to kind of build towards something, and to have like a concrete event kind of anchor like a long-term strategy. And maybe it makes sense to scale up to like to something like a 6-month or 9-month Symposium. That'd be like our first attempt at a strategy, and then we could kind of like go up from there. But yeah, I mean, I think we could randomize the researcher position pretty quick, and even maybe get that off the ground as a position quicker. But I tend to agree with the kind of hesitation to fully randomize that position, just because of experience, skills, time, and for example, like I really like the idea of someone happening to come up with a lot of clever ways to decentralize administration, but I also think it would make sense to set that as a strategy, and then essentially challenge people to experiment. So I guess those are the two kind of levels of experimentation. One would be this higher level for a researcher that can kind of present any kind of idea, bring any kind of thing that happens to resonate. Whereas I feel like the admin position, there'd be experimentation, but it'd be kind of like within these strategic goals. And then, yeah, there will still be a lot of experimentation. How do you get there? How do you implement? How do you make it work? But it's a bit more, specific in its.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that, I mean, now that Fatima said it, I kind of agree that this is a new moment, in the sense that if you compare it with where we were like end of last year, it looks like it's the collaborations with other organizations. This thing is growing, like more people are contacting us. The possibility of actually, having something publishable that we can transmit to others that makes sense, it's also becoming more of a reality than it was until recently. The size of the group is starting to grow to the point that we actually need to discuss some stuff about it. Like, for example, there is like a 6-hour difference time zone between where I am and where Fatima is. Like, it's too much, like there should be a way of starting to work around this. I don't know, like if we change the meeting time every week so that it's easier for some people and harder for others, but that changes who gets the hard time from time to time. I don't know, like these things are also appearing. So we're definitely in a new moment. What I do, I mean, again, it's just an intuition and a kind of sense of what brought us all this way. And I don't think we should let go of that, is that there is something precious about the fact that we learn things about where we're heading afterward, like retroactively, by allowing people to do many different things and then combining those things. We don't move forward. We haven't moved forward this far by having a very clear goal and trying to achieve it. We have moved forward until now by being very, very concerned with how to kind of take the next step in a way that is sustainable, right? So rather than like looking at where we're going, we've been looking a lot at like, okay, but where are we stepping? Who's presenting next? Or do they have everything they need to present? Do they feel like, can we mix this together with what was done before? Things like this, right? So perhaps it's no longer the best way to move forward. Perhaps we can look up a bit more. It's the first time we're discussing like what's going to happen in 6 months. Should we do the symposium in 6 months? Should we try to publish a book in a year? Like we never had that type of forward vision, but it would be nice to try to integrate that forward vision with that kind of plasticity, which I don't think it's a weakness. Like we just don't know where we're going. I think especially because we're trying to do something new and we don't know what can come out of, working with other organizations, which is not just educating people about what we know. So whatever you think strategic wise, we should find a way to accommodate that as well. But I don't think that would be a problem. It's just, it would be good to have that in mind as well, I think. And I mentioned this when we did our last organizational meeting. My kind of prophecy for the next couple of challenges we're going to face, I think the big challenge now is we're growing and we need to have a way to decentralize for real. Because if we keep growing and don't change anything, the group is going to rely on individuals forever because it's just going to be impossible to decentralize later on. So I have the impression that that's, at least for me, a priority to make sure more people feel comfortable, resourceful to take on stuff we already do, not to change what we do, but more people can do what we already do. Either if the group needs to split into smaller groups, if we need to have more meeting times, things like this. Like I have the impression that we will only be able to really grow, accommodate different time zones, accommodate, the needs of different collectives who want to engage with us. If we get more people who feel comfortable with the skill set that it takes to take those next steps that we usually focus on. And then I think that if we do that, the next big challenge is going to be language, because if you really become decentralized and if you really become kind of attached to different places, different struggles, usually people start speaking different languages because the language of every place, and then getting together again and sharing information becomes really hard. So I don't know, that's just my impression that anything that is too big right now in terms of big exposure, big plans, I think it's going to be hard to do in a sustainable way before we democratize these skills. We learn how to kind of train people to occupy these positions in a way that still keeps the group together, but just gets more people doing that. Perhaps the node tradition could be brought back, something like this. We could even, today Zoom, if you just kind of, use automatic translation, it translates in real time to other languages with just subtitles. It's crazy, but it's a paid service. But I'm just saying this because, I think at some point we're going to cross that threshold. So my concern is whatever big strategy we come up with, I think we need to have a good plan on how to make sure we survive taking a big step, like as a group, and don't just do something that it's a good idea, but we don't have the means to keep doing what we do, keep kind of enduring if we move in that direction. So, but again, I agree. It's a new moment, and probably like a bigger picture is needed than we needed it before. And perhaps that's also useful for people to feel more comfortable accepting, like, okay, knowing that this is where we're heading, doesn't need to be very concrete, but it's okay, we're heading in this direction. I'm up for being the principal researcher for 2 months, or You know, I want to commit to trying to solve problems we're going to have in this direction. Perhaps it makes more bearable, like Fatima said, like makes more sense to people, right? No, no.
Yeah, I was just, sorry, Renzo, do you want to go first? How are you doing?
Oh, sorry. I was. You can go ahead. I can talk next.
I was just going to say what Fernanda already mentioned, with Gabriel finished with, is that we already have few documents, I guess, here and there, that we did for like a job description or so on. So maybe we can try to draft something also related to. I remember in one meeting we were discussing how to socialize this knowledge that is being produced. So I was thinking maybe we can like use newsletters and like have subscribers, even individuals, if they don't belong to certain organization. I was also thinking today that maybe next year or the year after, we think of I don't know, online school, few courses here and there that actually study the work that is being done. So there's a lot to work on, but yeah, maybe we can start with these little steps of like trying to grow these documents that we already have.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm getting a bit in the middle of the discussion, but if I got where it is, when I'm thinking that I feel that there's maybe like two senses in which we have to sort of like, that I feel the sort of like dynamics of our work is structured. Like there's one line along which is like more research. It's like how research is sort of like gets to develop in, and it tends like as it is right now, is quite linear in the sense that it's always like falling back onto previous stuff, and it has to always like be able to sort of like go backwards and sort of like push towards a new step. So there's this, and meetings so far have sort of like the linear structure of Monday meetings sort of like is suitable for that, right? So concatenating and pushing for new text and exploring new ideas and so on. But I think again, and that's something we touched on another meeting, like on how this linear order sort of like is good for a certain type of dynamics, which is the research. I think theory building, I think it works really well, but there is this sort of underlying, and that's, I think it's more and more ongoing, which is, for example, before it was, we call it like the parallel like conversations, right? But now we have ongoing subgroups, like the conversations with the Communist Caucus, the text, and so on, and they sort of like, it doesn't feel like it needs to like all the time sort of like looping back into the Monday meetings, like the Joe from the Communist Caucus, it wasn't mediated through like the Monday meetings, like there was no need for that. So, and that's, I think, an interesting feature which points towards like this, it is already, there's stuff that is already decentralized. We don't need to like do work for that. The work that we have, I think, that we have to think about is how do we glue back and report back into like a unified space, like how we update the whole group of stuff that is happening, like publications and like exchanges with other groups, like what's relevant to be taken back to a centralized space, and is the space like the Monday meeting, or is it like it could as well be like subgroups have to report with like some note, like summarizing everything that has been done. And then there's the central space is like a text, like some sort of like forum. But I think these are like two different stuff, like stuff that we're already doing decentralized way and that we want to continue, and it seems that we want, and how we pull it back towards like a global space that everyone is on par. and the other is like how we keep on developing theory. If part of the structure is decentralized, theory seems to like take this, at least for now, like this. We don't know how to do. I think we still don't know how to do like. We haven't done research or theory building in like decentralized way. So I think I was just trying to like map out these things.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that though, because I mean there is theory stuff happening in parallel as well. Like Dennis and Alex, you had things going in parallel. I mean, I agree that's different, but I think.
But I think the publication sort of like tied,
yeah,
in a way, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not true that it's completely,
I think perhaps one thing goes from non-linear to linear, like the theory thing, it happens on side conversations and then it coalesces in the Monday meeting, whereas the political stuff is going the other way around. Like usually people find out about it in a kind of centralized way, like through video, text, so on, and then it becomes a separate thing, you know, like perhaps there's a dynamic difference. No.
Drawing a little on what Lorenzo said, I was going to ask, actually, I remember a while back we had a meeting in which there was, it was, I believe it was more centered on the operational matters, right? So what is currently being done, it was on like a spreadsheet and such. I don't know if that's still available, but by what I understood, that's part of what's necessary now in order to either glue back, as Renzo said, or to find a way to decentralize in a propositive manner. But in any case, those skill sets,
this thing here,
are somewhat, those skill sets, for that matter, everything that's part of like what would be like, you know, like by what I understood, something that everybody should be able to learn, or like you said, if they get into the central admin position, that's something that they would have to learn or ask for info and that sort of thing. So that I remember that was one of the central points, right? How to, if there is a position of central admin, how that would be taken by anyone who decided they were up for it. But at the same time, if this is part of the discussion on a know-how that should be passed by, it would be important to go back to this operational matter, right? Because it seems like if this is not properly addressed, it might saturate one or two or three peoples and individualize it more than it needs to be, right?
I think John has his hand up.
Yeah, I think just in this idea of like gluing things together, that I think that makes a lot of sense for like the actual activity and day-to-day or week-to-week like stuff you need to keep going, like what Fatima was talking about in terms of like newsletters, especially like if we had ways to produce content by the different groups to then kind of like pull, and in this idea we're talking about of sensing, kind of like sense what kinds of folks are interested in what kinds of problems, and kind of like giving different ways for people to interface with our theory. And there's a lot of ways that we can just like summarize and condense that don't have to go through the big process I think we've associated with writing so far. When we're writing these essays, there's a lot of ways we can streamline stuff, but that'd be a real way to like actually create the scaffolding. I think that would be the actual glue of tying these things together. I also really like the educational content because I do think ultimately we're going to come up with the problem, even within our own group, but especially outside of like, what is category theory? What is this basic topological stuff? And there's a lot of tradition in lefty organizing of like doing, like, I mean, they had literacy classes in Russia so people could read their propaganda. So it's kind of like that idea, like how can we produce content that would enable not just to learn the math, but to kind of learn the math in the kind of direction towards our theory, which is definitely, there's good content out there, but it's not geared towards opening up the kind of ways to think category theory that we're using. So that could be a really good challenge, both in terms of like the research position, but also organizationally. How do we solve the problem of producing something in a steady, predictable manner, which is like a huge leap above what we've been able to do up to now. That's the kind of thing that I think with the strategy we can lock in kind of like actual goals we want to accomplish. So then when we do inevitably fail trying to accomplish them, we actually begin to have a way to keep a tally of what those failures are, and hopefully learn to kind of like restructure in a way that makes it work.
Yeah, just so we don't we continue on the list of stuff we wanted to update everyone on, but also answering, I think, some of the stuff John said, and I think that, and Renzo also mentioned this idea that perhaps we should always think about these two levels of strategy. Perhaps that helps to define this, because, for example, let's say some people in the group want to try and coming up with an educational project. I find that committing everyone to an educational project is going to be hard, but that shouldn't keep us from trying. If somebody thinks it's a good idea, they have a way of doing it. So I agree with John that it kind of like like there is one level of strategy where it has to do with content. What should we be doing in the next couple of years? And I think it can be more diverse, strategically speaking. And then there's like a larger sense of strategy, which has to do with what are our plans for gluing together all these strategies in this period with the resources we will have, right? So we have limited resources. Limited resources don't only limit what we do, they also limit how we inform one another of what we're doing. Because, for example, if we have infinite money, we could just fly everyone to Beirut and we could, work together on the project. We would have time. Then we all fly to somewhere else, like a circus group, and something that would be amazing. But we're probably going to be online and bored, and tired. So that changes things. Like keeping everyone aware of what everyone else is doing is very hard because of that. So I think that those two senses of strategy are really hard to keep together. Like, for example, personally, I wouldn't invest time in teaching people mathematics right now, but if John is up for it, I would be stoked to help out. But my main concern is, how do we bring this back? In which sense is it still the same group that is having all this diverse strategy? So there must be like a meta strategic problem of how to keep these different projects connected in a way that's real, like they are interdependent for real, in the sense that it's really facilitated by others. The comic clown teaching mathematics, like that's what makes us clowns. Teaching people mathematics. That's the circus part. So I don't know. Like I think that probably we will have to think in those two levels, and I think that we have documents for the higher level as well, and like what Fatima said, like and Fernanda mentioned, that we have some. Caio also mentioned we have some documentation already to help people have the skills to glue things back into the group. Like I think that's when I say like we should look at the next step. That's the thing that worries me the most. That we manage to move ahead and have more fronts of experimentation that can engage more locally with people on the terms of these different projects. I don't think it's what we can do to help out, the SA, or what we could do with the Vienna students, or what we can do with this political scene in Beirut. Those are very different things, and would be very bad to have one idea for everything, or to have everyone doing everything, probably we won't manage to do. But it would be good to make sure that even though there are different people engaged in different things in different ways, there is some, like Fatima mentioned, the newsletter or something to keep some level of interdependence between these things, right? So that we can actually kind of inform one another and enrich one another's experience through these things, because we are developing a theory that should facilitate that as well, right? So yeah, just saying that because I think it's whatever we do in that regard would be good to worry about, and perhaps that even clarifies what a principal researcher and a central admin should be worrying about, right? Like local projects, we don't need a central admin. People are going to be doing these things because they're going to be doing them. But how do you keep somebody engaged and concerned with unifying the group, like theoretically and organizationally? I think that's what these two positions kind of ultimately have to concern themselves with, right? So I'm just gonna jump on Maurice asked this. I think it's a good segue to just mention this, right? We currently have two ongoing things, like actually three now, because we did have a meeting in Beirut that Fatima organized, like a huge thing, in fact. But I think right now we have three ongoing collaborations and one that we haven't picked up on because there was also that oh my God, that guy from the Unitarian Church who looked us up. I don't think he ever answered, right? We did answer him, right?
We answered him and he never answered
back. Yeah. So yeah, the three things are these students from Vienna, they approached us last year. They're occupying the arts university. I forget now which, it's this big private university thing. If I'm not mistaken, they started this.
Private universities don't get occupied normally, but yeah.
Let me get you some information. Yeah, it's the, where did I add the link for this thing? Yeah, it's this thing here. Let me send you the Instagram link. So they approached us. They said, look, we're occupying the space. It starts with, in the context of other universities doing similar things. They demobilized, but they continue. They tried to continue. They went through a bunch of things. We had a couple of meetings discussing their experience, just trying to listen to them and see what they were facing, their challenges. And then the last thing that happened is that we had a meeting where we agreed that, I mean, we heard a lot from them. We took a lot of notes. And the idea was we would convene amongst us and come up with a written thing to send to them, either in the sense of almost like an interview or a kind of inquiry about what they're going through, or like a more synthetic diagnostics from our understanding of what they're going through, or things that might be interesting to contribute. But the idea was for us to get together, whoever's interested, put something to paper and send it to them. I think that one of the ideas that was circulating was doing it in the form of kind of questions that we think would be interesting for them to ask themselves about what they're doing, and then see how they respond, and put them to work in the sense they would have to get together and answer that kind of questionnaire. But we haven't done that yet, and that's kind of where things are right now. Renzo probably can speak a bit more about the DSA thing with Joe. I think was Dennis also in the meeting? I think both of you were, right? With him, I wasn't.
Yes, we had a meeting briefly Joe runs the political education section of the Communist Caucus, which is a branch of the DSA, I think. And I think in a few days they're having their national meeting, May 19th, and they wanted to do a segment or a special presentation on STP. So Joe met with us. He had already prepared a document kind of summarizing some of our ideas from the working through political organizations text. And it was a really good summary, actually. I thought it was like, I was proud because it felt like our ideas translated very well. But then, he also wanted something written from us as well. So I think Mark, who I don't know if he's in the call, but Mark volunteered to write a short summary, and I think they're going to use that. But the outcome of that meeting also is that we agreed to have an exchange. So some people from STP will present at the Communist Caucus later in the summer, and then some people from their group will come to us and present hopefully soon.
Yeah, it was a really good summary. I was so happy to see like both Joe's summary and then Mark's as well was really clear, and I totally agree. Like, such a relief to see that these things like people can transmit them.
Yeah, I think it came up in the meeting, like when what is like a 2-page document that can summarize everything we're doing that we could keep up to date, maybe. Like if somebody had no idea who we were, what would we send them? Yeah, we have a text, we have like working through political organizations, which is a good, but it's still like kind of dense.
Yeah.
But
like I think it's a really good example already of why it's hard to right now funnel, because I think we're treading new ground. Like if you compare the sort of thing that's useful with the Vienna students, which is like asking questions, challenging a bit how they describe their own experience, because it's a very conflictual, contradictory account of their own ideas and strategies. Like sending them our theory didn't help, like didn't do anything. It's different from like the Communist Caucus thing where they are interested in the education aspect. Like they're not discussing a specific political intervention. They're trying to understand what they're doing to themselves, like, and for themselves, right? So like there are different ways we might find out that we fit in a political ecology. Some of them are more educational and theoretical. Some are more like helping people just flesh out their own ideas. I don't think we should, like, we don't know what we're capable of in that sense yet, right? And I think different people here might have more vocation for different things. Like some people might be more excited about the educational aspect of transmitting these ideas in a clearer form. Other people might be more on the analytic side of listening and seeing if there's a way of just being a good partner for discussing strategy and discussing diagnosis, And then there's the Beirut situation also. I'm not sure if Fatima wants to describe how it went.
Yeah, can I just add like a point that I think it's interesting that came out from on last meeting, is that I think not only, I mean, Joe sort of like approached, one of his points was like, yeah, I really want to introduce the ideas of STP on like the grammar, the political grammar of the caucus, and like and the first step would be to do that in the political education meeting. And then like the issue of like how to present them and which text would be more suitable for that, and like think about like our use of formal tools and how that can like be like a challenge to like present and so on. And like we talked about like how like in that kind of context, not citing authors and not like putting two diagrams like in their faces would be the right way to sort of like and stick with like quotations of like the punchy parts and let them sort of like sink in. But I think another thing that he said that was really interesting is that he said that the caucus is, their composition is very like heterogeneous in the sense that they don't fall along like some dogmatic political like line. They don't have like some sort of like clear political line. Their common sort of like what brings them together is actually being open to different forms of inquiry and sort of like experimenting, trying to like, if you read their documents, they come from like a diagnosis of limits of the logics of electoral politics and the limits of the sort of more like insurrectionalist tendencies in the US. So they're sort of like trying to, without like sort of like picking a side, they're trying to find like a common ground between two, and so they accept, their members are like, they have different sort of political commitments, and the second feature is that they are all have to sort of like, one of the conditions, I think, if I remember well, like, not on one hand, membership is sort of like open. On the other hand, they expect that everyone in the collective engages with what they call base building, which is like interacting with stuff which is outside of the caucus. So it's not sufficient to be sort of like part of the endogenous reproduction. You actually have to engage concretely with some external entity, which is the base building aspect. And I think that translates like, so it's not, I don't think it's a coincidence that these people who are structuring that this way sort of like found this interesting, because it resonates structurally, like, right? It's their composition. We have this sort of like strategic commitment to like bracketing political commitments of each member and trying to like see what comes out from that, and also be interested in like increasing the heterogeneity of the group, and also like engaging with external, like it's all, there's this structural level which I think goes beyond the sort of like the education part and the other part, and it talks about like this compositional sort of like work, which I think is demonstrated by him not necessarily having to come to our meetings. It's just like this sort of like structural semblance is enough to sort of like import the model, and sort of like, and then it's just a matter of like introducing the words and so on, but like the material is there, so they don't have, he doesn't have to like come to the meeting. So it's a different way to sort of like propagate stuff. It's like having similar parts, not like talking only just like talking the same, like having the right material. But yeah, sorry, I spoke a lot, but yeah.
But Fatma, what was your impression of the Beirut activity retroactively?
I'm thinking about what Renzo said, and I think, no, that's exactly what we are trying to do here in Beirut. The thing is that there's a bunch of comrades who happen to be interested in Marxist theory and philosophy and psychoanalysis and so on. So during Bikar Summer School last year, we've talked about this idea of expanding the activities of the summer school, of having something more frequent, maybe developing a kind of research collective and so on. So this idea, we have been talking about it for like the last year, and we will try to, I don't know, start something next month, discuss it with Bikar organizers. I've been trying to push on for meetings, but not so much, because like everyone is drawn in their lives, And the thing is that maybe you're trying to copy this idea of trying to write collectively about, I don't know, the reality here. But the thing is that this is a hard work somehow, because like everyone is taken away with their lives and so on, and it hits differently when the academic situation for each comrade is like very disturbed. So yeah, there's a bunch of student collectives that we can be networking with. There's also this question of how to socialize these theories, these ideas, these, I don't know, conversation. But yeah, the event was pretty good. I was surprised with the amount of people who came. And it was very telling that everyone needed to like sit together after several months of the uprising and then the pandemic and so on. So the frustration was seen, I think, amongst everyone. Everyone needed to talk and like to discuss and was mad and so on. So there's the issue of the refugees now that is like very pressing. We're trying to have meetings. There's nothing concrete yet. But yeah, I think once we start to structure ourselves, we can get somewhere. Anyway, yeah, it was heavy apparently.
Can I just ask you something? Do you think that because I know Abdallah showed interest, other people, do you think if we manage to have a more welcoming time zone or some solution to the time zone problem, do you think more people would be up for meeting regularly with STP?
Yeah, I already talked about this, like having Abdullah, Ziad, Natasha, and others from Beirut presenting their work. I don't know. Yeah, trying to have like meetings other than Monday. I'll try to see about this during the summer school during this month. Yeah, that's something we want to work on.
I think it's also worth saying that from the BCAR organizers, there was also a lot of interest in what we do. Nadia and Ray Brassier, they were kind of really eager to get us to do like a workshop with their summer school. Nothing concrete came out. Like they thought about flying me back there. I'm not sure if that's gonna happen like right now. But they were also open to other ideas on how to do it. But they were clearly keen on having something like a slow, step-by-step theoretical engagement with our work. So I think that's in the works. If we wanna make that happen, we can definitely do like propose to them an online thing or propose something for next year where we can try to raise more funds. They can also raise funds to take more people there, things like this. So that's definitely also in the horizon from that engagement. Just as a side thing, like I was really surprised how similar some things are between the Brazilian conjuncture and the Lebanese. Of course, Lebanon is like way ahead of the curve in the level of collapse and disaster. Like if we have a master class of the end of the world in Brazil, they have like a full summer school of the end of the world. Like it's much more advanced, but it's very familiar in many senses. And I also feel like that sort of kind of exchange of experience from a more conjunctural point of view of comparisons, I think it could also be useful, like I'm not sure, Fatima, what you felt, but by the end of the meeting, I know everyone was tired. We ended the meeting with Fatima yawning and saying, "I can't. I just want a cigarette. Let's just focus." And but one feeling that I had is that having a more kind of a shared account of the last couple of years, where people's kind of despair or crises in the left is not so justified based on how other people betrayed serious work, but the situation is unbearable for everyone. Like that sort of more structural description, which is something I think we fight for in Brazil as well, to be able to account for the crisis of the left in Brazil in a less moral way, where it's just fault of the Workers' Party that they just destroyed everything. We were right. And we were right, but we failed because they defeated us somehow, right? Or the right defeated us. Like there is something similar to this, which I think could justify like specific meetings, like specific activities to exchange experience. And perhaps, if again, the idea of like a need of diversity of strategies in the Communist Caucus justifies like they're using our thesis on peripherization and so on. Perhaps that's even another group we could bring into that conversation to compare conjunctures and things like that, I'm not sure. So I think that there could be an activity that has a concrete content we could plan as well, to fortify that connection. I don't know. Not at midnight as well. Okay, just to finish the list of stuff, the last three things we have on the list are the writing stuff that's going on right now. One of them, I think, connects to the topic we just mentioned, which is the blog entries. The idea was to have the blog entries for every meeting, and a newsletter would appear out of that, right? Sorry, let me just paste the meeting stuff. Yeah, so I think that there are some blog entries we haven't done, and I think that that's actually like just like everyone using that in a more free form way could also be a way of keeping people informed of different projects, right? Like rather than just doing one entry per meeting out of a lottery that decides who does it. Like if you're engaged in something we're doing in STP that others don't know about, writing a short blog entry that we then compile into a newsletter by the end of the month, that would be like perhaps the cheapest way of doing it. Like in terms of the structure is already there, right? It would just be a matter of using it rather than coming up with new things. And I mean, I'm a bit in doubt if you guys think the blog entry strategy of everyone who, every meeting that has a presentation, somebody is drawn in a lottery to write about that meeting, and they have 2 weeks to do it. That hasn't worked very well. Like I think it's a 50-50 thing, right? Who writes, if people write or they don't. Like, should we keep at it? Should we try to change that idea? What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think I'm a bit compromised to give an opinion because I haven't handed mine.
No, you're perfectly positioned. You have lugar de fala.
Yeah, and I'm badly organized the lottery because I sometimes forget.
Caio is the other side of this. Caio was still joining. He was already like, no, I'm doing a blog entry. He was like,
yeah.
So I'm not sure what you guys think. Should we keep it? Should we like make it looser? I mean, I'm not sure we can decide. We could put it into voting if you guys think it's not worth.
I feel if there's like like a presentation where there's like natural, like spontaneously someone is just like volunteers because he's interested. I think there are many cases where there's someone presenting and there's like someone who's watching that's interested and paying a lot of attention, and the cost of like writing some stuff down is much lower than a randomly picked. Like I think I took I had like a lot of resistance to like sit down and write because music is one of the most alien subjects to me. Like so I just felt like if I were to sit down, I would just write like in like a stupid way. And I know that we're supposed to like, you know, but it's just it has a higher, like if it were another topic, I would probably have like an easier time. So, and on one hand, it's good because like you get out of your comfort zone, you're like forced to like learn something else. But the truth is just like it's less likely to write on stuff that I'm. So I guess like if I were to change, to have the option of like people who want to write. I think it's good that we have like blog notes because apparently people have been reading them. Like, but if there are volunteers, like it's like if there's no volunteers, then just like pick someone randomly, like you do in schools. But yeah, I think that would be my impression, maybe.
But do you think that if we try to stick more to a culture where, for example, Vitor drew, I think, Alex's, yeah, Alex's pre-house meeting, right? And it was like, this makes no sense to me. But it was an opportunity. We didn't manage to do it, but it was an opportunity to meet and talk about it. So, I mean, there are good things we could do to use the fact people might be inhibited and collectively.
Yeah, but it is a bad example because that didn't happen, right?
No, it's a good example. I mean, it didn't, but it could. I mean, come on, give us some credit. Like, it can still happen. Don't let the dream die. You know, and the same thing. I think that. Like there's a double inhibition. There's the inhibition if the theme doesn't match. Like I got a meeting that I don't know anything about. But I mean, there's the added inhibition that we can change, which is you could start a text with something like, you know, music has a lot to do with mathematics. And there's a topic in mathematics I really like. And then you talk about it, like, you know, like, or the inverse, like mathematics starts with the letter M, like meatballs. Today I'm going to present a recipe for meatballs. And then you just go off.
Yeah,
like if we had more of those things, like it would become easier, you know?
Yeah, if we were to create the culture of working like that, yeah, it would, I agree, it would be good than just like the natural people who are like naturally inclined were to write. Yeah,
because I just afraid that like why have this protocol if the people who are gonna write are the people who would write anyway? Like, I don't know. I'm afraid of like we're losing the opportunity to get more people involved with. So I don't know. Yeah. Perhaps it's asking too much, and I do agree with John that the idea that the lottery is always a fallback to something else there is some wisdom to that, perhaps, generally speaking, but yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, but in the end is one way it's like it counters specialization, and in the other one it favors circulation of knowledge. So it's
Just by listening to what you said right now, Gabriel, I think that if there's a way to just leave that perhaps in or if we could perhaps have a certain guideline to the production of this, like I think that would take a lot of the anxiety and perhaps part of the inhibition as well, because like I think that having this, like, again, like having come recently and learning the ropes and everything, like to write a blog entry was very much so like, okay, let me see what we have, let me take a look at what's been done and try to keep up. But the way you just expounded it right now, like, okay, like, oh, going from DM to meatballs to like math and stuff like that, it seems like a rather playful approach that perhaps would take away a little bit of the edge, you know, like, okay, what did you get out of it? Like, I don't know how much Vitor, for example, is familiar with what was exposed in Alex's presentation, but I imagine that when he gets to it, he might have to ask for a couple of notes, get into, which is an opportunity that's nice. But also, at the end of the day, he's going to produce something that his interpretation is possible interpretation of it, right? Like, okay, I got this from that. Like this is I don't know, my view of what it could be. These are the questions that were raised. It seems like giving a guideline to what the blog entry could be might help with just a little bit of the taking the edge off, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, for me, it's always this challenge of coming up with something that takes people a bit out of their comfort zone, just because, I mean, we're not going to engage with the hard stuff if, you know, for in any way. So it's good to have a collective structure for that. But the cost of getting out of our comfort zone sometimes is too big. Like, given everyone's tired, you know, we don't have time. So like the measure of those two things is really hard to perfect. Yeah. So I don't know. Like, I'm not sure if we yeah, if we come up with a specific protocol, or if we change anything, or put it to a vote to change it. I don't know. But definitely, I think that the blog entries there. I mean, we're very close of turning them into something we can send people. A lot of people ask for a newsletter. Fatima said that it could be helpful to just be the place where we discuss, you know, and present to people a bit of the strategy, a bit of the basic stuff. So, I mean, if we did manage to create a culture where these blog entries are used more freely, both for the meetings but for other things as well, I think it would be really like the shortest path to have some decentralized mechanism for keeping track of stuff, right? And then, for example, if somebody's a central admin, making sure that they read the blog entries is a good way of keeping track of what everyone is doing, right? Yeah, we do the lottery before. The idea was to do the morning before, because this way, if you're drawn, if you're the selected person, you can try to come to the meeting if you're at least not planning to, right? Just to go over the other two things really quickly. I mean, I don't think that they're that. It's more of just letting everyone know, right? The text for Conrad Hamilton, he asked us to severely edit it down. It's between 10 and 12K, but we have time until July, so I think we're just postponing doing the dirty work of cutting the text down. But it also means that the full text we have is not going to be in the book. So it's going to be like a new original text whenever we want to publish elsewhere, most of it anyway, right? Dennis, you might know this better than I. Like, I think that we already have the strategy for shortening it, right? I mean, it's not like, it's just a matter of kind of getting around to it, right? Then it's just traumatized by it. Yeah, so but I think that's it really for that text. And then I'm not, Renzo, I think you might know this better. Like, did Miriam already agree to translate, right, our text?
Yeah, so I think, yeah, Miriam did, but I think people agreed they wanted to be sure that what the format was before she doing like
Yeah,
translation work that wouldn't be used. I know that Caio is also interested in helping with translation. The other thing is I talked with Regis, and he said that yesterday there was a meeting, but they just decided that like the general theme, which is wait, let me read it for you. So that it's just the theme, which is nature as natureza como campo de batalha. So nature as a field of struggle. And then in the next meeting, they will discuss the text that were already presented. So, and then we'll get, I hope, like confirmations and also the format, like the length and so on. So, I mean, it would be nice if translation, everything was already on the workings, but that's where we are at least. Yeah. And you also mentioned that we could, yeah, we discussed oh yeah, and then there was discussion on in the meeting with Michael and Median that for the Brazilian version it would be nice if we worked on a sort of like preface for the working through, in which we discuss more like concrete Brazilian conjecture. And yeah, so and Michael was sort of responsible of writing a structure on that. And yeah, and then there's I think Gabriel, you mentioned that there's also like there could be a way to make it into like a book at some point and something like that.
Yeah, it's just because I mean, so it's kind of settled that the Brazilian translation of that text would the first option is that it comes out in Vladimir Safatli's journal. We're not going to try to do the little booklet for it, right?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, I think the strategy is that we make it come out in the online because it's more concrete, and then we can. No, I mean, assuming that we want that there is no like how do you say, like authorial sort of like rights that impede that we eventually make it into a booklet. But so we're not saying we're not doing a booklet. I still think people want to be a booklet. It's just that the most concrete venue and short term is the online thing. Yeah.
There are two things I just wanted to mention on the publication side. One is I really think I mean, two things. The first is there might be, it is for the Portuguese thing, there might be a book on the June journeys that the institute I'm working for, Alameda, might be editing for the end of the year. And I think it wouldn't be hard to put S2P as an author in that book. So, for example, if we do write something about the June journeys and the political conjuncture of the last decade to preface the long text, perhaps the long text wouldn't fit in the book. I imagine we would have the same problem again, but perhaps a version of that could go if we want. So there might be an opportunity there. But the other thing I was just thinking, I think we could talk about it, because I don't think it's just a manual thing. I think it could be, if we're talking about strategy for like a year, I think it could be like a direction for the group, which is if we wanted to put a book together, I think we already have material for a book, like probably not as the material currently stands, because the atlas is very all over the place. The last two texts, they're more kind of cohesive, but still they were written with more other, like the recent one was written in this debate that is not like the fundamental debate for us, so we probably could change it as well. But like it could be a project if we want, and it could like facilitate even the educational side to create a skeleton using this text, and then have a program of revision and kind of revising, polishing, and improving things that are bad in all of them, and turn it into a book. Like it would probably, that's why I say it's not just a matter of gluing them and having a manuscript. Probably would entail having meetings about things we already wrote, clarifying what we meant, rewriting them from the privileged standpoint of where we are now. People who are not so acquainted with the material would be very important, because they could give good insights about if it's clear, if it's transmissible or not, things like that. So I'm not sure if it is something we want to commit Two, it's definitely something, if there are people interested in it that could do it on the side, like a parallel project. Let's just get these texts together, polish them, and refer them, create like a mini manuscript, send it to the group, see if it makes sense and if it's approved. I'm starting to have good contacts with leftist publishing houses. We could probably publish it, or we could turn it into like a main thing where we put together a skeleton, like, I don't know, the first crisis and critique text, then the last text now, because it has that kind of map of, you know, different types of left theory, then the crisis and critique text, the one Miriam's translating, and then like parts of the atlas, because there are case studies, we could make them bigger. There's like philosophical discussions, we can have those things, you know, like, I don't know. We could imagine like this huge thing. It would be even bigger than a book. Like it would be a very, very long manuscript if you put it all together. And then we can go over it, debating it and clarifying and removing and making things better. I mean, could probably come up with a bunch of meetings and a bunch of kind of projects for smaller groups to work around and to make sure everyone starts getting on the same page on these ideas. So, you know, it can either be just a side thing that we do it like, is there a small group who wants to work on a manuscript? Could it work? Or no, we can make it into a bigger thing and structure things around it as well. So, I mean, I'm not sure if these things kind of have appealed to the group right now, but I do think that there is enough public and enough kind of things are becoming clear enough to be transmitted and for people to recognize that there's a singular position in a ongoing debate that we're taking, you know? So I'm not sure how you guys feel about it.
I really like that idea. I think that it would be a really good opportunity to try to experiment with ways to present this. I mean, especially going back to the Atlas, like kind of really rethinking how we could exploit that opening, kind of like using different shaded in areas of monster to really kind of explore different dimensions of the plot in terms of like formatting and diagrammatic kind of layout to really kind of give something that's like not just like a book, but almost like a manual on how to apply a lot of this stuff and use a lot of this. And I think if we made it a main project, it could link in nicely with this symposium and future symposia where we're like kind of bringing people together, kind of probing what kind of practical questions and what kind of theoretical things are coming up with that, and also kind of collecting case studies or other people's like contributions that want to add in and using that to kind of like link together and then putting the book out there. But I think that would make a lot of sense and would also give us an opportunity to really try to address the question of like, what do we hand people? Like there's like the 2-page version, there's like the essay version, and we've got some good essay versions, but like this would be the good like.
Yeah, just so you guys know, if we just combine the original outline for the research we published on Crisis and Critique, the atlas, the social atoms in social worlds, and the working through political organization, that's 110,000 words. That's pretty much exactly the manuscript like Northwestern accepts as a, for example, like the one I published, that's exactly that size. So definitely book size already, you know? Yeah, so I mean, yeah, I mean, that's what I thought. Like, if we do want something that, you know, facilitates people getting in line about the ideas without having to necessarily go into the details of everything and just getting the general view, and it would, and at the end of it, we would have something, as John said, like it would be, you know, a good summary we can work on top of, or send people these things. And so I'm not sure what you guys feel about it, but it's just that I don't know. I had the impression that that's very much doable, and if we wanted like a flashy person to make it, you know, more noticeable, for example, Ray for sure would write a preface. And I think we could get Badiou if we wanted as well, because, you know, if you quote Badiou above a certain amount of times, he's automatically interested. So I think we're almost there. We just need to quote him a bit more, but then he would be interested. And yeah, so I don't know, just putting that out there. Yeah, I don't know how we would do it. Again, that's what I said. Like, I think it goes back to Fatima's question about strategy. Let's say that the slogan for the next year is like unification of the theory so that people can use it for education, to bring more people in. I don't know. Let's say that's the theme. Then perhaps making this something we go back to in the Monday meeting from time to time might be a better idea, right? If no, like we're doing something else, this is more like a side thing, then perhaps it's not a good idea to focus too much on this. Like it's not like everyone's going to be interested anyway. So we can just bring it up to the group when there's big problems. Like, okay, guys, this is our proposal for a structure. We're going to be working on this structure. Then if everyone is on board, we go back, we work on it, try to make things clear. There's a problem, we come back, try to present the problem to people, but then once people discuss that, we go back to a side thing and work on it in parallel. So I think it depends on if we find it useful to whatever is the kind of overarching project for now. I didn't even add to this list, but there is also the paper I'm writing with Thiago, which is like 80 pages long for now. 60, 70, like it's in Portuguese. We're going to publish it, I think, by the end of the year, and we have a translation of it added as well. So yeah, I don't know, there's a lot of stuff to bring together if we wanted.
I wanted to mention it's actually another topic, but I think it's might somehow dialogue with this discussion is which is I think I'm the question of like how to integrate. I mean, it's I don't know if it's, I mean, yes, I think if it's not in the topics, but I'm just putting out there, which is like how, the ways to integrate new members. And like I realized that more than half people here probably, I think, joined like in the last couple of months. So because I think another thing that it would be interesting to discuss is how to like take more seriously exactly like how coming up with mechanisms of how to like bringing people into the collective. And I don't think we have put out like concrete like many like protocols for that, right? And I think like we informally, like people who reach us from different ways, from emails and like personal like connections, we do like, I don't know, like we normally do the effort of like keeping in touch with them and explaining how it works. But it would be nice. So it doesn't, I feel like on one hand it doesn't feeling like this problem of what is the sort of like strategic line that sort of like binds the collective. But I think coming up with this sort of like a general mechanism of how to link new members, like having some sort of like, I mean, some ideas I think we're already sort of like proposed like having tutors or like people being responsible of integrating new members. But coming up with like some sort, I feel like we could come up with like a more concrete thing of how to do this work, that if we manage to do that, that would do the more like, it would be the organizational counterpart of whatever is the sort of like content, like subject that we will be working on, be it the book, which I think it would be great that if it actually like came into existence. I think it could be very useful for us, and for especially for like reaching out like a wider I think it's the way we have now, have like sort of like sparse articles which don't give like the full, it's hard to like get this more broader picture, and having a book is like, I mean, it's hardcore to like actually dive into like a super big book of our stuff, but I mean, it will for sure be useful for a long time. So I think it's definitely a good and worth thing. But yeah, I just wanted to like put out there this other topic that otherwise we wouldn't be able to discuss it. I think that could be, it's into like the structure section of the meeting, I guess.
Yeah.
But I think it's a counterpart. Like I think it's a counterpart from this sort of like researcher function, is having a more like anonymous protocol in which like everyone should be more or less responsible for integrating. And I mean, probably hearing for people who are like newer to the group is probably useful. Yeah, I like that idea, John, actually.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, like, on this, I mean, I totally agree. I think we should listen to people, but I think we also should just acknowledge where we actually did a lot of work recently to prepare for new members. It's just that we don't have the manpower to, nobody's responsible for being attentive to applying the things we already made up. Like, newcomers are meant to give short presentations of what they're doing. We came up with this really good document explaining everything we do, how we do it, all the links to how we do it, right? I mean, there are some stuff in the air for welcoming people. It's just that who's meant to walk people through this and help out, showing them the ropes, right? Or making sure. So I think it's also a mix of perhaps not having the right tools. We need to see if that's true, but also that even if when we have tools, just because of the nature of the group, it's also hard to know who's up for having that task, right?
Yeah, it seems like
Fernanda was doing a
either,
lot of that.
yeah, exactly. Either we have a someone like a central admin assign it, or we have like the random random generator that John suggested. But yeah, we should take that more seriously. I think a lot of people have shown interest, but we don't really follow up with it usually.
Yeah.
Probably, I'm sorry, you raised your hand. Probably it would be helpful if you had like something like a description or so of what you are interested in. Like, we need people on those topics, or we are interested in people who have been working on such and such stuff. So like, that wouldn't be like, so like when I or somebody else sees, oh, okay, they're interested in that, this or that, or they need that and that, I have that competence. One could get like directly into contact with people. Just came up. because like at the moment it's more like one sees all that stuff you've been doing and it's very complex and also intimidating. Mm, mm, and that would be somehow a different perspective. Like one already gets an idea like how one would probably be contributing in the future.
Yeah, I like that idea. I think if we could get a sense from every newcomer what they are interested in, and then we kind of create like a matching system where we match that person up with someone else who might be more experienced in STP and also has a similar interests, then that might ease the onboarding process. And be less intimidating, because it's not like, oh, you find your place, and like here's this big project, now you find something to do. It's more like like a matching service. Like we connect you to the easiest path into the project.
I mean, it's quite the opposite actually. What you guys have been working on and what you need. But yeah.
Okay, what we need. Yeah, that's hard to answer.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, it's not like we know. I mean, we did do this, like that's how we met Yasha. I just screamed on Twitter, does anyone know what stone duality is? And that's how he came to the rest. But
yeah, maybe on that topic, we have a lot of open questions. Maybe it's a good idea to create a central document where we put all of our open questions, like just dump it all there, and then people can look at that list.
Yeah, I was gonna say that what Renzo said. I mean, I don't want to intervene too much. Fatima had her hand up for a while now, but yeah, I think sometimes we answer with protocols things we should answer with the culture. Like it's not the same.
Yeah, I was just going to say that it seems that the researcher position and the central admin has a lot to do with communication. There is this thing, I think maybe over the group, someone was discussing how do we communicate with other people from like different places, and you're just allocated to someone and they take it over. So I think maybe the central admin can be doing this exactly without having to do like the bureaucratic stuff. Also like organizing the meetings. It seems from now to the end of the year, and there's this idea of the symposium. If we do it like by the end of the year, there will need to be like meetings on that, and the texts that are being written and communicating with other groups, or like organizational meetings. So yeah, maybe we can start also by, before we have a central admin, like try to organize ourselves even before going on. So maybe in the next organizational meeting where maybe more comrades will be in, and yeah, just try to, as I said, glue it up together. Let's see.
So I wanted to speak a bit to what Maurice brought up, because I think that that's a real issue, is like how do we help people kind of interface in terms of what we need at the moment, which in turn I think breaks down to a few different things. Like some of them are questions like open problems, can you help us understand this, that, or the other? But there's also like, open things to do, open tasks that need to be done, and all that stuff. But I would be reticent to like just make a list, because I wouldn't also, like, for example, like we could probably use all kinds of mathematicians for all kinds of things, but I wouldn't want to like single out anything that might then seem like we're not interested in something else. Like I think our research is so weird and all over the place that we keep finding it resonating with all kinds of ways, which is why I think to address that kind of like concern, which is legit, I think like however we pair someone up or some people up, that should be one of the kind of goals of the task, which is to kind of translate what needs to get done. And just to like flesh out, because yeah, I think randomization in general is good. I'm a big growing fan of that as a kind of democratic principle, but specifically in relationship to this, like I think it could work well to, you know, match people up based on pre-existing interests and stuff, but that's also a likely thing to then happen, right? Like if two people have specific interests and you help introduce that connection, then that's a likely connection to form. One of the values of starting randomization is less likely connections are more likely to be made. And I think it's good to kind of encourage just more connection in the group, like more interface, more whatever. Like it helps to take out of like just a few people's responsibility ending up like handling all the out of meeting socializing social reproduction that actually keeps groups going. And it helps to like over time decentralize the actual, let's call it like the real costs of camaraderie. Like we all like each other and are friends, but also like emotions take energy and food and time and whatnot. And like the more we kind of distribute that out, the more resilient I think our group becomes, and the more kinds of people we'll be able to interface with because we'll have more people in a position to connect more, kind of thing.
Yeah, I agree with the more future, less protocol, but so I'm trying to make it more concrete because I agree like we it's not about like coming up with like rules, but it's more like how like mechanisms that create a certain culture. And I think out of the top of my head I can think of like like two simple things and one more elaborate thing that I think could help in that direction, which is one, I think because it played I think I saw it like I feel it make a difference. Like one is, for example, and it's similar to this idea of assigning someone to like be in contact with new members, but just by like I think people who like mostly me and Gabriel like reply emails, and just leaving like phone numbers is actually like a great way to like just reach me out. Like there's a person in this email that's and you can reach me out like. And I think Morris, I think we reached me on WhatsApp, right? And also Joe, it worked like that. And just like having this like this thing that in email like is very useful, but like I don't know, like people who drop in meetings and like many people just follow like many meetings for like a long time before like making themselves like because there's just like there's no like entry point. So I think coming up a way of like reaching it's harder to think of that on like during a meeting, like right, how do you like just like gossip to someone like, you know, there's a new member. But and that leads to the second thing. I think it would be nice, and it's similar to like having presentations of new members, but just like every now and then like having and that happened with Mark on the Meet with Joe, which was funny because like Joe asked of us that we presented ourselves like a short bio, and Mark said like, yeah, I don't think like I ever like talked with anyone to the STP, so that's the first time I'm actually presenting myself to the STP is actually to you, Joe. And then we came to know like who Mark was by that. So like I think like just people like saying where they're from and like what they're up to, like having this sort of like present like short like awkward thing every now and then could be useful. And that which leads like to the third thing, which is I don't know if we decided or not whether these organizational meetings are recurrent and I think it would be nice if they were, but assuming there is this kind of space, then an idea that I like my sister used to do when she ran like projects in the university, she had like this supervising group, and they had this recurrent group, and the structure of the next meeting, there were like at the end of the meeting, volunteers were like picked to decide on the sort of like group dynamics of the next meetings. So if we had like this sort of like an idea would be, if we have like the spaces to sort of like reflect on our organizational stuff, if we can experiment with like some people planning what the next meeting should look like dynamics, or I mean just coming up with the agenda, but to the minimum, but also like mechanisms of interaction. I don't know if that's like too sort of like group dynamics, but yeah, just some like simple things that I think could help improving this, like making faster, like easier for people to find entry points to the group.
I was just gonna mention that that's exactly what we used to do at the youth and the student sector in the Lebanese Communist Party. So every meeting we have like quick updates on organizational stuff and so on. And then we discuss the topic why we are meeting for. So maybe sometimes once month, in a month or in 2 months, we have a long organizational meeting, and then in other meetings before presentations, doesn't have to be recorded too, and we just do some updatings about who communicated with who, if it's not done on the WhatsApp. I was going to say something else, but I forgot. It's 2.5.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea too.
And maybe we need to take meeting notes, and at work we do it yearly, so we have one document for all the meetings we do in the year, and we just like put the dates and so on. So maybe we can start doing this at some point. It's a boring job, so we have to have people volunteering. Yeah.
Can I just ask a question, just so, because there are many ideas popping up. Does this, am I correct in assuming that all of the fact that there are a bunch of ideas that wouldn't take too much work to implement, but would probably be easily implement if there was somebody worried exclusively with that? Does that suggest probably should speed up the process again of this central admin principal researcher thing? Like, I'm just trying to see if like because when we first mentioned it and Fatima said, yeah, perhaps we should get a strategy for the next kind of a bigger picture first, I felt like, okay, perhaps we should slow down, worry about where are we heading generally, and then worry about these things later. But now at the end of the meeting, my impression, I know it's not everyone is here, but anyway, we are here, like perhaps it's the inverse, like getting some version of this off the ground, even if it's like just for the sake of, you know, a guerrilla organization problem for the next 4 months, you know, but just try to push this as soon as possible, get us to decide on this, and get somebody to, you know, to test how it works, but also to implement some of these very basic ideas that have to do with keeping track of the organizational news, you know, just worrying about making sure newcomers are properly welcomed. And even if it is like either to directly talk to them or just make sure that they're matched up with other people, like somebody to that we know who's responsible for these things, you know, should we perhaps kind of move this up in the list of priorities? And you know, we're not going to decide anything here, but we could just bring this up in the WhatsApp group, you know, tomorrow, and get back to that conversation, but perhaps in kind of an emergency mode, you know, like it's not, we don't need to define the last version of this it's gonna be used forever, but like just define something for the next steps, you know? What do you guys think?
Yeah, if I can add like if because I think if we're able to like by Morris to I think an importance like is premised on whether like these organizational meetings are regular. If we assume that like if we had it's one of the a proposal I think instead of having like a central admin position, if we had like a how do you say comissão, like a committee,
A
like
committee, yeah.
like a committee that's responsible for preparing the next meeting, and that committee rotates, like in the sense that maybe like at least one member should change for every next meeting. You know, like if we have like a committee of 3 to prepare the next meeting, they're responsible of taking up all these functions, like making sure that stuff is going well until the next meeting and preparing the structure of the next meeting. And then it rotate, like some new member comes in and someone comes out. So basically making this central admin a bit like a committee, not like a single person, and having it slowly rotate throughout the group. I think, and that's structured around like this organizational meeting. So there's a sort of like always concrete touch base for like what has to be done. I think that could, yeah.
But it's an idea for an emergency version, or is an alternative idea for how to do it in general?
It's emergency. It's easy to like organize. Just saying like who is responsible for organizing the next meeting is automatically has to like make it happen. So just everything we talked right now has to like be implemented. Isn't that like the fastest way to like? And
my brain is melted, and you just introduced a new idea. So yeah, I can tell if it's easier. Yeah, okay, perhaps I don't know. Is that easier than just like going to the group tomorrow morning and saying, hey guys, given the amount of stuff, could we try to implement Victor's position with just a 2-month deadline? Can we do a lottery now and just open a poll and vote yes or no? If majority votes yes, in 1 week we do the poll and we do the lottery.
yeah.
I mean,
the difference is if it's whether like one person or a committee. I think that's the main. But yeah,
by the scope of the discussion up until now, it seems like at least even if to delegate these things, it would be interesting to have, right? Because I think that was more or less what I got from it, right? Like given the amount of things, even for this central committee, if this were to be rotating, right? It would still be necessary to have like someone perhaps like strategically overseeing, or at least for the next couple of months or so, right? It seems like a faster perhaps solution to have this like for the next week or something, right? Or at least putting it in the group, relaying there, right?
yeah, I know. I just introduced like a new
yes.
But I just
but
right now
Fatima's face like oh my god.
I'm sorry. We can do it with one, but I just feel it might solve like a lot of the pressure of just having to pick one person who's like responsible for a lot of stuff. But I'm fine. I'm totally fine with just like electing one person and trying it out. But I think, just came to realize.
But it doesn't seem to exclude your idea, because like this seems like for every meeting. And I was actually going to ask, like, couldn't this be something that could be somewhat like I don't know, put into like a small algorithm, like just okay, we have these members, just so for the next meeting, these people are selected like at random. Is that the idea you had, or would it be more or less like, oh no, there's a couple of people that rotate systematically? doing this organization like for the next meeting? How would this work?
Yeah, the way I think it was like people who are like want to organize the next meeting, they form and someone has to like, it's something that we have to do. They're just responsible for the, and normally it's the people that are like, but then there is some compromise that this group can't be the same always. It's just, so there's a pressure for it to sort of like some continuation because it takes less work to actually like start every time like a new admin. So it's something, some knowledge is passed along, but there's always like some new member that has to help organize, and it could be picked like randomly. So we can just start with like volunteers or like with randomly. It doesn't matter. I'm just saying that it might solve some problems that we came upon. Like the big problem was that we had 2 volunteers that wanted the position, and it was supposed to be just like a single role. But I'm just saying that if we just like, I think it might solve some of the problems that we were facing. But yeah, but I don't want to like make it more complex. I'm just saying that it might make it easier long term.
Yeah, I don't have the mental power to have an opinion, but I could see it work. I do think it's a good idea in the short term. I think that if people don't get a chance to be involved for longer though with these things, the idea that they get to try things and see if they work, get feedback, try something else, like you don't get to do that, and I think that's a pity. So I wouldn't go for that just in general. Like I think it doesn't necessarily offer to people the space to think like, you know, put themselves in the position of thinking, okay, how do we solve these bigger issues? It would be like a quicker solution, you know, and you just deal with the next meeting and then you're gone. But you know, like how do we integrate new members? How do we integrate different projects? What's the best way to inform people about these things? Like I think it's a good thing. We don't have an answer, and it would be nice to have different people who are interested in these issues to be in the position to propose, then have a couple of months to work through these things, right? And I think that's also it is it's not a position of mastery or authority, but it's a position of coordination, that you know where to look to see the whole. And I think that if it's turning all the time, it's shifting all the time, you won't get that. Like you know who to look to see the next step, the 2 people who are organizing the next meeting, but you don't get a feeling that, you know, you can just say, you just joined, go talk to that person, they will give you the overview of what's going on. Like I think there's merit in somebody who takes on this coordinating point of view, that they put themselves in position to know what's going on everywhere, and they also facilitate that people see the whole thing, right? I think that's part of what makes this position useful. So it doesn't need to be one person. We could just make it more flexible and say, we ask you, we do the lottery, see if you want to do. You might say, I don't want to do it alone, I want to do it with someone else. That's fine. So it can be a commission if you want, or it can be a one person if you want as well.
Right. Yeah, my emphasis, I just want to make, my emphasis was in like the possibility of not being a single person, like being more than one, rather than being rotating, I think.
Yeah.
So,
I think this committee can combine actually the person who's gonna be coordinating and communicating everything related to the research or to communication with exterior organizations. And even if it's going to be rotated, let's say per year, so it is expected of every I don't know, every committee to have like a what's called a newsletter at the end of the year that, I don't know, so they will be responsible for all these, what's called, yeah, to organize meetings and to have notes and to do the thing for like briefing and writing blogs. So I think this is more logical than expecting one person or two people only. I don't know. Yeah, maybe two, but you know, one person to do this all like sounded impossible. I think.
Yeah, I mean, just recall that like the idea anyway was whoever is selected or whoever wants to do it doesn't need to do it all alone. They can also, they're in a position of coordinating, they can delegate it, but it's then their responsibility to delegate, right? I don't know, I think that
Having this committee, yeah, but having this committee will make it more organized. So like, it's not like every couple of months you have someone doing something and then things get lost. You know, you have to keep the flow as well. So
yeah. But it's, yeah, I understand what you guys are saying about not making it too focused on one person. I do think that there's a difference between, let's say, who does the activity itself. It can very well be many people, but who is responsible? I think that should be, we should have a, you know, the hierarchy of responsibility. It can funnel into less people, while the hierarchy of activities can actually have many people involved, but which is how it happens often. So that just helps to, it's easy for newcomers to at least know where to look, I think, and it's easier for us to know who to give feedback to, and it's a way of ending the, you know, I let you do it, you expect me to do it, I expect you to do it, nobody does it kind of thing, because at least you break the cycle from the beginning. You know who is responsible, you know, even if many people end up doing it. So I mean, I just want to make sure even if we go with a collective procedure, that we solve this type of issue, because otherwise I think that it can just reappear. But yeah, just to go back to the original point, I have the impression that from everything we said, a lot of the problems we raised today, they don't really require much new things other than just like enforcing stuff that is kind of almost already there, you know? So it does seem like it would be good to try to bring that discussion back, even if it's like with more than one version, and do a poll to decide what version of this should we run with, do a poll to see if should we move faster with these discussions, if everyone agrees. Now that everyone agreed on the last organizational meeting, the polls last a week, as long as they are transparent and like everyone knows they're, you know, we did enough to make sure it's known that they are open. It should be easier to make those decisions, right? To make sure that they have a good platform for the decisions to be made. So yeah, it might be just a personal intuition, but I have the intuition that probably a good idea to move ahead with these things, you know, not let them sit and focus. Like, it might be a good priority organizationally to see if we can sort this out sooner rather than later.
Shouldn't we also decide on like this because it's not clear to me, like on the status of like how regular we want to do these meetings? Like, should we do a poll on of
Yeah,
how
maybe a
regular?
good idea. I think that somebody, yeah. Yeah, let's
maybe we do a poll, and I was saying like maybe we can do an organizational meeting next month, after a month and a week. So if we have it more regularly, maybe once a month and a half. So this is somehow the state of urgency that Gabriel was talking about. And I guess by the end of the year, things would be more clear after communicating with different organizations. So yeah.
I mean, now that I've seen the calendar, we could propose to do it after the 19th, right? There's nothing scheduled there. it's like a month and a half away, and I remembered seeing somebody saying that, proposing that we should do it like every 2 months, have one organizational meeting, but I don't remember if this was like discussed or just a
I
suggestion.
think it was Rafael. Maybe we can have like a rule of thumb of like at least a month every 2 months. Sorry, at least a meeting, organizational meeting every 2 months. But we could also have it like monthly if there's demand for it, like, but not going more than 2 months without one, and maybe
I see.
one every month is also fine. Like I wouldn't be against that but if we have like many presentations for some reason, then it's fine to like slack on that a bit. But maybe having like some guideline.
Yeah.
Uh,
Also, I mean, let's recall also that if we manage to do a bit more, like Fatima said, like, you know, beginning of a meeting, let's say we have, again, somebody responsible for doing this. So beginning of the meeting, they give a bit of an inform on what's going on. Like, so updates are not so needed because everyone is updated more regularly. Like, we would empty out all these discussions. Like, it would be much less to discuss in this meeting. So it would be okay to have them for, you know, with the less frequent if we're up to date with the stuff, right?
so the idea would be to have updates in the beginning of every meeting.
Yeah, I think it depends. I mean,
Ah.
if it's feasible, right? The way things are now, it wouldn't be feasible, right? It's just too much stuff. But if everyone's caught up, we have means to do it. Somebody's responsible for doing it quickly and so on. We have notes so others can read it. Perhaps it's possible, you know, like 10 minutes, you know.
Yeah, I like that idea because I think if you wait too long to give updates, people lose track.
Yeah.
of things.
I mean, let's also recall, like, we actually do, again, we are doing much more like that. Like, if the bulletin board is, you know, constantly updating people on anything, like most stuff goes there. Perhaps not the content of the stuff, but like, it's good to remember people, remind people that they can go to the bulletin board in the community and they see every meeting, every new group, every text, every link. Like, we can even do a bit more of that if we wanted, so that we also don't spend time in the meetings. Like, you wouldn't, like, we could have like if there is somebody responsible for organizing, they could like every week just post like a short, you know, these are the news of the week I gathered, and they just post there. Like, we could make it. I think there are many ideas to, again, I think we're halfway with many solutions, you know. We just had like, we knew that somebody could be up for creatively doing it. I think the step is not that far. Another thing, what was I gonna say? You know, I just a side remark. You know, we're dangerously coming close to just adopting the way CSII used to do its meetings, because it was like divided in 3 parts. We did like a institutional part, then we had a presentation, then the last part of the meeting, we took everyone had to write a little short note, either a summary or a question from the previous meeting, and that's how we structure the next meeting. So then the third part of the meeting was a debate based on the notes, and then people would write a note for next week, everyone, and that structures the next meeting. And the coordinator of that meeting does the institutional stuff, does the presentation, and works on the notes for that meeting. And then the next meeting, a new coordinator gets the notes, does the institution, like, it's almost there, you know, it's slowly going back to it.
When you said dangerous, I thought you were saying like to democratic centralism sort of.
No, I think we're too crazy for any clear strategy like that. I don't know. But
Yeah,
anyway,
but I think it's a good idea to like parse these moments in the meeting and having some sort of like feedback on the next meeting, like some sort of like organizational work that ties them. Apart from before, it was more like trying to summarize what was presented. Now it should be more like,
because actually, I mean, we're really getting close to that. The circle had two people. One was the +1, which was a research coordinator, and one was the general secretary, which was the admin. The admin was the same for every meeting, and the +1 changed irregularly whenever somebody wanted to do it. The researcher was responsible for giving a presentation or asking somebody to give a presentation, and for reading the notes from the previous meeting, so that the next meeting is kind of answers to the questions or addresses the type of issue that they see were raised in the notes. So meetings had to respond to the constant feedback, and the general admin would give like a short institutional, this kind of, informative moment in the beginning, and get from people the news or whatever they are doing, so that it's centralized on them for them to work during the week. Then they would again give an like a news moment in the beginning of the next meeting, and then the principal researcher would present something and bring the notes. So it was like a thing woven out of these two things as well, So yeah, I mean,
did it work well? It seems by what you're saying that it worked well.
No, it worked for 8 years.
Sounds like a long time.
No, it works well, but it was slightly different because there were a few people presenting, so you would our idea was that the principal researcher wouldn't always present, right? It would just kind of give an idea of a theme for a kind of moment of research. And in the circle, actually, this coordinating position meant that you would read all the notes, think of a topic for discussion based on those notes, and present on that topic almost as kind of a response to a theoretical response to the notes, which is not, I don't think it fits very well with how we've been doing things. So yeah, but we are kind of moving to something which is a weird version of that somehow, just mentioning it because there might be something useful in that experience ultimately.
Was there something of a Lacanian cartel in the making of this? Like this idea, is it?
Yeah, that's where we stole it from. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, because I was thinking
+1 comes from there, Maizum. Yeah.
I thought so, because I think, wow, this is exactly there's a lot of it, and the responsibilities seem similar, with cartels, there's always this, right, this being I don't know, called to respond for this or for that thing.
No, there was definitely a similarity, I think.
Nice.
Yeah.
But we should have a name more like a Brazilian cartel, like Primeiro Comando da Capital. Inspire ourselves more.
Yeah, I mean, I never understood why Lacanians call this thing a cartel, man. Don't they know what it means? What does Lacan thinking, man? Why did he think this was a good name for it?
Speaking of the canyons, I wanted to just throw away an idea. I was thinking that maybe after Caio or something, we can invite Nadia for a presentation, and maybe we can have Daniel Todd on and bring Caio students, and that would be one way to, I don't know, do the stuff we're trying to do. So that maybe until the end of the year, it's not that we have to fill all the slots, but just have an idea of who we can invite people to do presentations. Also to Ziad and Abdullah.
I think that's a great idea. I mean, we could talk to Nadia, but one thing that I was going to ask you, Fatima, is, I mean, I don't think you need to write down a lot. There's just so much stuff going on. You've been around, and I wonder if I think everyone would really benefit if you just talk to us about your view of the situation in Lebanon at some point. It can be very informally, we don't need to totally prepare.
in that, like, having it as a research project. So I think, this is something that I'm gonna start. Either Dana, Yumna, Rami will get in, or like later would be more like enthusiast after they saw something concrete. But like, this is a very depressing question, so we try to avoid it as much as possible. But yeah. Also, I wanted to ask the last text you're working on social atoms and social words. So is this the text that's gonna be published in Conrad's book, or?
Yeah, a very small version of it is going to be published. Right now, the whole text that it doesn't have a place.
Because I was thinking 12 words could be published in the public source, so that's a different readership. And I'm also thinking of maybe experimenting myself, or experimenting my I don't know, skills in translation, to having this text in Arabic in Sifr magazine. It's an economic Arabic magazine, Marxist, and they do really good work. So I think they would be really interested in, I don't know, maybe having a podcast with some of you, and having the text translated to Arabic and published.
Imagine, that would be amazing. But it sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah.
And you're so free right now, like you have no commitments.
Yeah, I was this close to say that I might not be present in the next 2 months because I'm considering taking a second job, but yeah.
And then you're proposing more stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see.
Okay, let's try to think about this. I mean, I think the Nadia thing is easy to do. I think that if you were up for like presenting something informally would be really amazing. And if you can, I don't know, find a way to make this text circulate there. Abdallah also asked me about it. I think that he'd be willing to help if we wanted to translate something. I also asked him to come at some point to present his research. His stuff on racism is very interesting, and I love how much he despises the French. So be good to have him.
Yeah, we're gonna have a gringo hating presentation.
Exactly. Okay, guys, I think it's like really, really late. Fatma, please rest.
Thank you so much. It was a great meeting.
Guys, sleep well. Dream of dead dogs and things. And see you all.
See you guys. Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.